All right, there we go. So we are now recording. And Jamie has set this up as a presentation, so she's going to talk through and answer a lot of the questions.
You can't do that. Leave it alone. I can't do that.
Okay, so we're going to go ahead and get started with Jamie. This will be recorded, just so you know. So it's going to go up on the CAP website on the publications page. So you will all be able to access the recording as soon as we have that processed. All right, I am going to hand it over to Jamie. And here we go. Thank you.
Okay. Okay, so let me just share my screen with you guys. Okay, so welcome. My name is Jamie Dingman, and I teach at Citrus College. So a little bit about our online process. We started teaching our online co-rec class last spring, and we hadn't intended for it to go online in spring, but we had a need, so we quickly launched that. So I know where you guys have been, and I actually still feel like I'm there, still learning, still growing, still trying to figure out a lot of the technologies and how to really bring that interactive co-rec nature to an online environment. So hopefully we're providing some tips and tricks for you guys as you're launching your own classes online. So what we wanted to start off with was first highlight a student voice, because right now our students are completely overwhelmed, and now with them transitioning to an online environment, it makes it all the more overwhelming. So I wanted to share an email I received from some students this week. I am just apologizing in advance for my essay. I just got in from work, and since Wednesday, I have been exposed twice to COVID-19 possible patients. I work at a cancer hospital, and every patient is susceptible to this virus. The first person of exposure has to remain with the patient care the whole time. I'm going to try my best to finish this right, but all I have in my head is thoughts. The feeling of vulnerability, the waiting, you see the world differently. People storming to the stores or exposing themselves and their children. Please take care of yourself. Stay away from people with even sniffles, wipe down containers. I would write you another paper about my experience for nothing, just to say it quietly out loud. Thank you, just needed to say it. So that to me was really powerful, and it really hit home just how vulnerable and scared and overwhelmed our students are. So that's what I wanted to talk about first is let's address the affective domain. So how do I get everything done without overwhelming my students? And that is an excellent question. My suggestion is to break everything down and show them how to do that. I assumed that students knew how to do that, and then I realized they didn't. And so I make daily schedules for them. So Monday do this, Tuesday do this. I also like to send out frequent reminders to remind them to keep to the schedule. And you can set those reminders up in advance and just have them programmed to go off like maybe Mondays, Wednesdays, Fridays, and Sundays, whatever days you feel like you need to check in with the students. And that's really, really helpful. So let me show you what I mean by breaking everything down. So this is how I was sending out my work to students. And you can see right here, it says everything you have to do this week. And I have it all listed out, right, with just the due dates here. And so if I were a student looking at that, I would feel really overwhelmed. And I would be thinking to myself, oh my gosh, where do I start with all of this list of work? So what I did was I broke it down for them, right, into daily chunks. So do these things on Monday, do these things on Tuesday. So that way, all of that work that they need to do throughout the week is broken down, and they can focus on what they need to accomplish for that day instead of looking at the mountain of work that they have to accomplish for the whole week. And it actually is quite helpful. Here's a student response. Thank you so much for the breakdown. I will try my hardest to adhere to your due dates. However, as we sit through this pandemic, I'm not really sure exactly how this is going to turn out. Never in my wildest dreams would I have signed up to take a 5-unit online English class and homeschooling 3 kids in a pandemic. To say the least, I'm a little overwhelmed. Wow, that sentence is hilarious. So I will try not to lose my sanity, and I will try to turn in my assignments. I'm very disappointed how the semester has turned out. I guess this redefines grit. I will do the best I can. Thank you, and stay safe. So again, that was just kind of heartbreaking to me, and really reminded me that the students are are undergoing this additional stress. And so it made me feel good to break things down and try to help alleviate that stress. And honestly, this was a tool that I used for myself, right? In grad school, when I had like 1,200 pages of reading to do in a week, I would make schedules for myself. So I do that for my students, and it's a good skill for them to learn. So not only do I break down their individual assignments, but I make sure that the modules and the layout of the class is really easy to understand. So I use a module for each essay unit, and everything the students need, all the readings, all the materials, all the activities are located in the module, and they go through them chronologically. Okay, so here's another view. Okay, and I divide them into sections too. So you can see I try to kind of keep them similar to the language that we use with CAP, the instructional cycle. So we do reading activities, and then we transition into drafting materials. If you look here at the bottom, that's where we'd start the drafting part of the unit. I also make sure that I'm reducing the number of clicks by having all the assignments that the students need right there in the module. So instead of having them leave the module and go click on the discussion tabs to leave their blogs and do their journals, it's all right here in the module. And like I said, for me, I feel like I'll lose less students that way. The more times they have to click and go to different parts of Canvas, the more confusing it can become for them, especially when they're new to Canvas, new to online learning. I try to make it as easy and simplified as I can for them. So up next, let's talk about just-in-time support, because that's a big part of CAP, right? Is how do we jump in and give them that support when they need it? And that was a big question that we got. How do I provide students with that same one-on-one support as I would in class when those issues come up? So the first thing that you want to do is, sweep through your classes and the work and identify where the just-in-time support is needed. Another thing to do is, after you identify what needs to be adjusted, where the students need support, is I would say provide models and samples and guide them through the sample like we would do in a face-to-face format. And what I've been trying to do and make sure that accompanies all my documents are video lectures with annotations to help them. So let's go through kind of a problem solution scenario. So one of the problems that I encountered were my students were struggling with essay structure. So I figured, okay, I'll provide a highlighted essay sample with comments for them. And this is what it looked like. Okay, so we can see I have it color coded, right? Have these annotations out to the side. Well, that created another problem. It was too complex for the students. So my solution was to explain it in a video, right? And here's my rationale. In my head, this was a fantastic idea to just drop off this annotated Google Doc. And I figured, right, they'll read it, they'll see my comments, they'll know exactly what I mean. And they'll be able to take this model, see what's working, what's not working in this paper, and then do it on their own. It did not work. Okay? Many students wrote thesis statements that were totally off topic, and they seemed to misunderstand what we were doing. So I realized, okay, I need to record a video lecture on this annotated sample the same way I would take a face-to-face class with this, because I don't just drop this off for my face-to-face students. I actually stand in front of the class and we go through this together and we pick apart the paper together and I explain these comments in detail. So that's what I did. I created a video that guides the students through this annotated essay. So I left the video here. If you want to see what that looks like, you can watch me bumble my way through helping the students annotate an essay. Another thing that was coming up that you guys were asking was, how can I conference with students in an asynchronous class? What I have the students do is sort of like a drop-off kind of system, because my class is asynchronous and I wanted to be able to provide support for what my students needed. And I would say that my population of students, after really going through their syllabus reflection, a lot of them are non-traditional first-time students, and they're dealing with family obligations, they're working, right? They have kids. And so over and over in my syllabus reflection, I saw the students saying that their plan was to do school at night, right? After they were done with their daily obligations, after they were done with work, after the kids were in bed, then they could sit down and focus on their work. So I wanted to make sure I was providing them that kind of support so that when they had this opportunity to do the work, I could then interact with that work and not make them feel like they had to be on a synchronous schedule. So what I do is I have them drop off their draft, and you'll notice in my instructions here for the students, I don't look at the entire draft. I ask them to drop off one section, right? So that I can give focused feedback to everybody. And so they drop off their draft and I have them ask me questions. And another thing I would say is model questions for them, give them examples. Otherwise they'll just drop off that draft and ask you if it's good, right? They won't give you any specific questions. So we have to teach that to them. We have to model what those questions look like. So this is what I have the students do, right? So this is what it looks like when they submit the assignment. Then if they've submitted as a Word document or a PDF, you can use these great markup tools here, and it allows you to leave comments to the student. You can cross things out, highlight, leave these little bullet point notes. You can also, the students can ask you questions. This is where they can leave their 3 questions or ask you any additional questions. This is where you can leave those kind of terminal comments. And then down here, you also have more options for feedback. You can leave an attachment if you wanted to give a longer response, or if you were doing sort of a peer review sheet with the students, you could attach that peer review sheet. You could also leave a video or a voice comment. So there's a lot of options here. So I do want to make the note that these markup tools up here are not available for you to use if the students submit their work as a text box entry. So that might be something, if you want to use those markup tools, you make it clear to the students that you need them to submit the assignment as a Word document or as a Google Doc or as a PDF. I tell them, you know, I'll take it anyway. I can get it and I'll make do. But if you have a preference, definitely communicate that to the students and let them know. So some alternatives to written comments. You don't always have to provide those written comments, and some students might respond better to vocal feedback. So I've done that before. I did that when I was teaching over the summer for essay 2, and I'm going to actually do it this semester when we hit our next essay, is leaving voice recording. And one of my students said that was excellent, because what she did was she opened up her essay file and she read kind of through her essay point by point, listening to my feedback, and she was making notes on her draft of what she needed to change right there. And that's a great way to do that. Another option is I've had friends and colleagues do video feedback, where they actually screen record going through the student's paper and annotating and you know, giving them that feedback and then sending the students the video. So there all are alternatives. It doesn't have to be just strictly the written comments. You can make it more interactive. So the next thing we were getting a lot of questions about was group work. So how do I create that group environment? Because that is something that we really focus on in our CAP community of practice, is getting those students involved in the collaborative practice, right? How can I do group activities online? Is that even possible? That was one of our questions. And the answer is, yeah, you can totally do group work online. It will be a little bit different, and it might be kind of difficult at first, right? Because it's a whole different space, it's a whole different environment, but it can be done. What I like to use is the Canvas group feature. I create groups, and I have these students use these same groups for their peer review, for journals, and for book club to create community in an asynchronous class. So instead of having the discussions where everybody's replying and everybody's commenting, for these groups, it's only within those groups that students can see their journals, peer reviews, and book club work. And I'm finding that kind of sets up more of the community aspect that we have in our face-to-face classes. And I do have a link for you here on how to set up groups in Canvas. There's tons of tutorials and step-by-step guides on YouTube and also on the Canvas guides. Now, the Canvas guides do a lot of screenshots. If you're looking for kind of for yourself just-in-time strategies, how to set these things up, I would recommend watching YouTube tutorials and following along. And that's what I did to teach myself how to do those. And it's much more effective to look at those videos. So when you set up a group assignment, so for example, my journals, I have the students do blogs as a whole class discussion, and they all respond to each other's blogs. But like I said, for journals, I keep it to just those small groups that they work with. And I've actually explained that to my students here in their journal posts, the difference between the blogs with the whole class as the audience versus the journals, which is just their group as their audience. So when you set up a group assignment, like a group discussion, you'll see up here all the groups that you have access to. Be careful what you name them. My initial intent was I was going to have groups for everything, group for essay number 1, a group for essay number 2 peer review, right? Like create all these groups. And I decided I would rather create community and have the students kind of stick with the same group so they could have this little support system. And it was too late to change it, so I just kind of let those groups fly. So keep that in mind when you're naming your groups. It might be a little bit confusing for you and the students if if you have titles like that for your group names. And when you click on this, it'll take you to that student, that particular student group's discussion. And when the students reply to this discussion, it will only be going to those students in their discussion group. What I will say is when you're setting up group discussions, whether it's for a whole class or for small groups, you want to make sure that you're leaving very clear instructions for what they should be doing, right? What you expect in that post, and also the deadlines. Now, it's up to you how you want to do the deadlines for kind of the sake of maybe keeping your life simple and being able to reuse the material you're putting on your content pages. You might not want to put the due dates up here at the top. I do, because I have 2 due dates, right? Their initial post and then the comments that are due. But like I said, I have to change this for every single assignment since I put the due dates in the post of the assignment as opposed to just using the standard due dates. But that's also a technique if you want to reinforce when things are due and make sure the students are seeing those deadlines multiple times. You can put those due dates up here at the top and use the regular due date function through Canvas. So the prompts really matter. The students will engage and they will leave great responses and great feedback if you're creating meaningful discussions, right? So for this first discussion, this first journal, I was asking the students, you'll see down here, how they feel about their writing and why, and what they want to change about their writing and why. And they really opened up. They started talking about their true, honest feelings about writing and themselves and how they perceive themselves as writers and what they want to change. And they were agreeing with each other and sharing experiences. So that's one of my biggest pieces of advice is create meaningful discussion prompts so that the students have something to say. And for journals, I give my students the option to do their actual journals and their comments as video or audio instead of doing written journals. But so far, everybody has chosen to do the written, typed out journals and comments. And the reason why I figured I would allow journals to have that video or audio component is because that's what I really like to do with journals in my face-to-face class, is I have them write on journal, do a journal, a written response just to get their ideas down on paper. But then we have discussion time where we discuss in our small groups and then as a whole class that particular discussion topic. So for me, it was more about generating discussion and for them talking and sharing than it is about making sure everything is in writing. So that's just something to consider when you're doing different discussions. The next thing I would say is give them models of what you want. Participate in the discussions yourself. You might want to consider being the first person to post, which is what I do for the blogs, right? That's their first assignment for me, or one of their first assignments is to do a blog, but they might not know what that looks like or specifically what I'm looking for in that blog. So I model it. I leave them the first blog entry, and then they tend to follow my lead here. And for this first blog, it was sort of a get to know you, right? I asked them to tell me a little bit about themselves and then give me some of their favorite things and to leave a picture or a couple pictures of something or someone that's significant to them. And so I modeled, right? And left my 3 pictures that I thought are significant and I explained them down here. And the students did the same thing, okay? They really responded to this very well. Their responses were just as long, if not longer than mine. And they included all kinds of great, cool pictures, way better artwork than I was able to produce. And it was a great way to start the class and to get everybody sharing and again, create that kind of community. So moving on from there, what about peer review? How do we do that in an online environment and with groups? So what I do is I'm actually having the students use group discussions for peer review. And this is a technique that I picked up recently from @ONE, the online network of educators. One of the techniques that they used is to do peer review as group discussions. And the pros of having them do peer reviews and discussions is that the students can have, oops, I have a typo there, can have more of a discussion about their work, and they can ask for more feedback from group members instead of, just having it be the one-way drop-off point with a peer review assignment. Now, the cons or drawbacks to that is that the students don't have access to the editing tools in discussions that they would have with an assignment. So let me take you through that. Show you what that looks like. So these tools up here, right, that I showed you in that previous slide. So if you're doing an assignment, the peer review as an assignment, they'll have access to these tools. They'll be able to leave these margin comments, cross out, right, do the same things that we can do. If you do it as a discussion board, they don't have access to those tools, and it looks like just a typical discussion board response. So I make that clear to them that I want to create the community, and I leave them these instructions so they can see what that looks like. And that's something I would say make sure you do, is include really clear, broken down, step-by-step instructions for submitting peer review, because it can get a little bit complicated because there's those two deadlines, right? When you want the students to submit the work for their peers, and when you want the peers to respond and give the original writer their feedback. So I did that. I broke down very simplified instructions. I mean, literally telling them, click the reply button like you would for a blog, right? Open their paper, open the peer review sheet, fill it out, go back, post it to the discussion thread, click on reply, upload the feedback. So you do want to make sure you break that down. It does seem like it's kind of oversimplified, but that's what they really need, especially, like I said, when they're overwhelmed and they're still learning the technology themselves. Okay, so another thing that I do is I actually do book club. I make a book club happen in my online classes too, which also you might hear used called literature circles. And so I use discussions in groups the same way I do journals and do peer reviews. I have them stick to those same groups, and they do their book club work with those specific peers in that group. So what I did is I dropped off my video for you guys that I left for my students. And for book club, if you can, this is really highly recommended if you're going to do a complicated group assignment that spans multiple weeks, right? Like a book club, I would suggest making a video so that the students can see exactly what you're looking for in book club. And I modeled everything in book club, from how to do the assignments to how to go to groups and post that work. So that was something that I highly recommend. Same thing, I'm including my link for you here if you want to check out my video and see how I broke down and explained book club for my students. Okay, but what do you do if the students aren't participating, right? Because that's a problem. Students aren't participating or posting for book club or for another group assignment. What do you do with those students? How do you address this problem? Some solutions, and this is stuff that I picked up on my own, but then I also learned in some of those @ONE classes, is early intervention, like we would do in our face-to-face classes in our CAP practice, right? Is to jump in early and say, hey, I noticed you missed class, right? We would send them emails. Is everything okay? Is there something I can help you with? We can do the same thing on their work, on their online work, right? If you're noticing they're not posting, send them an email. And you can also send all students who haven't submitted a particular assignment an email from the grading feature in Canvas. So jump in and ask them questions. You know, what's going on? I noticed you haven't posted to your group, and the group is waiting on your part of the work. Is there something that I can help you with? Do you need another resource? What can we do to make sure that you're able to participate in book club? I would also say join the discussion yourself. Show the students that you are present, right? That you're participating. Because I participate in my face-to-face book club, as the students are doing book club and I'm sort of timekeeping, I'm walking around, and so is my embedded tutor, and we're jumping in those discussions and having those discussions with our students. So why not do the same thing in an online environment? Another thing is, trying to leave them quick grading feedback, again, so that the students see, okay, she's here, she's checking on this. I can't just, delay and not leave my work. Another thing I would say is, reconfigure groups if necessary. I have had that situation where I have had that one student who's just trying so hard and they're turning everything in and they're just stuck in kind of a dud group. So I've done that where I've pulled students out and put them in a group where it was gonna, they were gonna get the same kind of feedback and effort that they were putting out. And something else that you can do is redesign book club roles for whatever the assignment is, right? Or to have it more suitable to an online environment. At the CAP conference that just happened in February, one of the presentations was on doing more of a digital style book club. And her ideas were really, really neat. So that's something that I'm actually working on right now, is redesigning those book club roles so that they'll work with more of an online environment and kind of an online ethos. So something I'm considering doing is, instead of the summarizer, having the student be kind of a live tweeter, right? And have them kind of live tweet those chapters instead of having them just do a straight summary. And so that's something to consider too, redesign. So what about this co-requisite component? What do we do to provide that support? So how do you use this co-requisite time online? How do you provide that kind of support? So one of the things that I am showing you guys here is a co-rec activity that I designed for my second essay unit. And my second essay unit, just to kind of set the scene here, is on the podcast Serial. So I have my students arguing whether or not there was enough evidence to convict the person that's at the center of the case for the first season of Serial. And so that's their core text, is the podcast. And then their supplemental texts are different articles that discuss memory and evidence and cell phone evidence. And so I have them make the connections from those articles over to Serial and use those articles to help support their arguments. So one of the activities that I wanted them to have practice with is paraphrasing. And so this activity is something that you can do, or something similar, to develop that kind of co-rec skill, right? Is, okay, well, we've looked at the reading, we're reading, but how do we also incorporate writing, and how do we build the skill that's going to be necessary in their essay assignment? And what I like to do is also break down for students why we're doing what we're doing and why it applies to either what bigger project we're working on in class, or even how it applies to the outside world. So I'm explaining to them up here the difference between paraphrasing and summarizing, and that we're going to be introducing paraphrasing as a new sort of tool in this essay unit. And so the way I looked at it is, we're building on the existing skill of summarizing, and we're going to add in this new one of paraphrasing. And so for this, I have the students read the article, How Many of Your Memories Are Fake? It's a really, really interesting article that gets into how memories are created and really discusses, just how faulty our memories are, because memory is a core feature, a core idea in the Serial podcast. So I have the students complete this paraphrasing activity so that they can get used to paraphrasing and not just rely on pure quotes or pure summary. So what you can then do is provide that co-rec support with feedback-based low-stakes practice, right? Which is what this is. This is the low-stakes practice part. When it's in their essay, that's the kind of the higher stakes assignment, right? Is you want to see, are they able to summarize and paraphrase and integrate quotes? And so here is the practice part, right? And I'm giving them that feedback, letting them know, what they're going to need, if they need to correct anything. So it's a little cut off here, but I was letting the student know that she had she was trying MLA, but it just wasn't quite there yet, right? And I was letting her know, okay, good, you have the bibliographic information, keep this handy, you're going to need this when we actually get into essay drafting. And that's something else, like I said, I'd like to make sure that they understand, we're going to need this, we're building on these skills. This isn't something that you're doing and then we're never coming back to it. All of these assignments we're using to build to our essay. And like I said, it helps the student see why this skill is necessary or useful. And so you can give them, this kind of feedback here. And I like to also help them make those connections for this paraphrase, right? By making the connections over to the podcast. So when they're talking about, the way memories are recorded, well, what does that mean about this person's memory? in the podcast. If she's saying she remembers things in detail, does she? Does she really remember those things in detail, or should we call into question what she's saying? So it gives you also kind of, a place to help the students make those connections. Also, we'll get into this, the low stakes thing. You'll see my grades are 1 out of 1. And that's my next point, is consider a grading policy that focuses on learning goals over performance goals. And so what I have designed for my classes, and I started doing this in fall, is contract grading. So I've gotten rid of the point system completely, because what I saw was that my students were wanting to focus on collecting points and weren't really focusing on learning, right? And that also felt very hypocritical of me too, because one of our first readings is we're reading Drive, and they talk about, in I think the first chapter of Drive, that very specific concept of learning goals versus performance goals. And so it felt very like inauthentic for me to really talk about performance, not being the key, but learning being the key, and to have grit and to have a growth mindset, and then everything was based on points. So I felt like if I really, really want to kind of transform the way the students are looking at their own learning, I need to transform the system in which I'm giving them feedback. So I've gotten rid of traditional point system, and for most assignments, they're just going to get complete or incomplete. And for kind of bigger assignments like essays, or if you're kind of putting essays together in smaller drafts, I use the feedback categories that we would use in some of the rubrics. If you've been in CAP, you'll see we do above expectations, meeting expectations, developing a skill, and not yet passing. So I use those feedback categories as opposed to points. And then you can see here, this is how the students are graded. And this is kind of my beginner's way of stepping into contract grading, is doing it this way. And this was kind of helpful for me to do it this way, since this was my first time. And since I don't have tenure, and I wanted to make sure I was, kind of making sure all those things were in place, and so I could justify what I was doing, and make it also intelligible to the students. So this is how I'm setting up my contract grades. So for an A, 90% of all assignments from all categories are submitted complete. All essays are above expectations or meeting expectations, and no more than 8 missed assignments and no more than 8 late assignments. And then it goes from there through those different grade categories. And something to note that is not on this page, but it's in my syllabus for the students, is the late work section. And for their late work, I actually got rid of penalties and time limits. So I don't put any since I got rid of points, there's no point penalties, right? And I don't have them incur any other kind of punishment or penalty for that. And there's no time limits. I told them they can turn every assignment in up until the second to last week of the semester. And a lot of people thought, well, that's nuts. You're going to have everybody turn in everything super late. They're going to wait till the last minute, but they actually don't. What I saw from my syllabus reflection when I very first explained to them the grading contract was appreciation. The students really liked this notion that they had that leeway for late assignments, and that they were being graded in terms of feedback and not in terms of points, and that they would have the opportunity to revise almost every assignment. I tell them that the final is not up for revisions, but I've even had students revise the final. But that helps to reduce that sort of dread and overwhelming feeling that they get in their English classes is, okay, I can fix these things. And you can even have that apply to other assignments. That goes back to kind of the just-in-time remediation, or giving them the feedback. When students would submit late work in the past, it was a 50% penalty for me. And so what I had was students kind of doing 50% of the work. They would turn in the late work, and it was just not to the great quality, right? And I could see why they wouldn't do it to full quality. It was already late, and it was only going to be worth half credit. So why kind of go all out and put in all this effort if your teacher is going to dock all those points right off the top? So what I've noticed is that when the students are turning in their work, it's done well, it's done right the first time. And if it's not, I send it back and they correct it and they bring it back to me, and we don't have to worry about keeping track of, you know, points or deadlines on that kind of thing, because it's more about them, right, submitting the work and making sure it's quality. And they're actually really, really respectful about making sure that they get things in on time and not flooding you with an insane amount of late work. So that's definitely something to consider, is a grading contract. And for this semester, since everything has kind of turned into chaos, and the students are really overwhelmed, and particularly in my 8-week class, I'm teaching an 8-week 5-unit online co-rec class. I essentially told them, I'm not going to count the late work against you at all. Essentially, you know, if you're able to, if you turn all of the work in, or, you know, most of the work in, still within these categories, and you have the passing scores on these essays, you know, I'm not going to fail them just because the work was late. I totally understand what's going on. And that too, I've gotten responses from students, and they feel so much relief knowing that as everything is so chaotic around them, that their instructors really trying to help support them. And they've said it kind of feels like I'm cutting them a break, right? It's like one less thing that they have to really worry and stress out about during this time of chaos. So some things that I wanted to provide for you guys are some notes, because I know we weren't going to be able to go into everybody's questions and answer all those questions in our time. So I did create a sheet of notes for you guys with kind of some bullet points and ideas on a lot of the different topics you sent in for your questions. And then I also compiled an online instruction resources sheet for you. And it's kind of like all those resources in one spot. When I first started teaching online, these are things I wish I had, is kind of just a one-stop, go there and have links to all these great little online tools. So that's something I created for you guys here in the PowerPoint. So if you have any questions, or if you want to reach out to me and discuss something, or if there's something you want to collaborate on, or if you have watched my videos and you have any feedback and think I can do something better, please feel free to shoot me an email and let me know. So Summer.
Hey, Jamie, it's Summer. Yeah. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
We have a little extra time. Would you be willing to take some questions in the chat?
Yeah, sure. Let's do that.
Okay.
Do you want me to stop sharing my screen here?
Yeah, you can do that. Let's see. Let me open up the chat here. Are you able to see the chat?
I believe so. Can we ask questions via chat? That was helpful. Thank you. Yes. Okay. Oh, you're welcome. Thank you. So how does the contract grading work for peer review?
So if anyone has questions, you can go ahead and type them in the chat.
Okay. Yeah, we'll try to get to as many as we can here. How does the contract grading work with peer review? And we have timed writing requirements for articulation. How does that work? So for contract grading work with peer review, it's complete or incomplete. So if I feel like the students haven't done a good job of leaving peer review feedback for their peer, I have them do it again, or it stays as an incomplete. Timed writing requirements, that's a tough one. That one, I don't know. I don't have the answer for that one. I would imagine that's going to take some collaboration, discussing, and trying to figure out what your campus can do to accommodate our students who might need more support. I'm not a big fan of timed writings. In fact, I got rid of my in-class timed writing assignments because it's just overwhelming. Oh, thank you. Okay. I noticed in your screenshots that you seem to be color coding your annotations. How does that work? I just did it. So when I was teaching the essay in class and we were going over, for example, introductions, I created this kind of little like equation for introductions that was based on some stuff that I learned in teaching high school, teaching introductions to high schoolers. And so I teach introductions as having 4 main parts: a hook, an elaboration, a bridge, and the thesis as the 4th part. And so I was just color coding just different colors for each of those 4 sections, so the student can see how that student writer was making sure she incorporated all 4 elements of an introduction into her into her paragraph. And so I explain that to my students, that the color code really is just to show them that there's 4 separate parts all working together in the introduction. Okay. Oof. Equity. Okay. That's where I am switching over to contract grading, is trying to help address that equity gap, right? Is looking at the late work, how I'm going to accept late work, looking at what I'm going to accept from students also, right? Like I said, does it always have to be in writing? Couldn't it be a verbal discussion, right? Could it be a video discussion, an audio discussion? And that way they can demonstrate some of those skills to you, and it doesn't necessarily have to be in a written format. So that's something to consider. Let's see, what else? Would you recommend 2 Canvas shells? One, no. In fact, we did that. We had 2 Canvas shells when we had our courses split into the 4-unit English class and the 1-unit co-rec. We did that for 2018, when we first, the 2018-2019 year, when we first launched our classes, and we went all in. And we had 2 Canvas shells. I didn't use the Canvas shell for the co-rec because I don't do separate co-rec assignments. As you saw in the example that I did for the paraphrasing, I build all those co-rec activities right into what they're doing for the essay. I don't do like, okay, now here's the grammar section, and we're going to do this 20-minute activity on grammar. In fact, I'm kind of radical that way, in that I stopped doing a whole lot of direct grammar instruction, and I have the students do like grammar research projects, little low-stakes grammar research projects, and then as a whole class, we'll cover comma slices, run-ons, and fragments. So I would stick to the 1 co-rec shell, unless it's something that your campus is requiring, that you have those 2 separate classes and you have 2 separate, right, spaces and activities that are kept separate. I like to just keep it to 1 Canvas shell, because then again, if the students are new to online learning and they're new to all these technologies, it can be really confusing going in and out of the different Canvas shells. And that was one of the first questions I started getting when we launched it was called 101S, 101 and 101S at the time, where the students saying, what do I do with this other Canvas class? And I told them, don't worry about it, we're not going to use it. And then I disabled them. Okay, let's see, what else do we have? How will you handle the potential bombardment? I haven't gotten a bombardment. So far, so good from any of the classes that I taught. And I did end up, like I said, giving them the deadline. I think it was like a week before the semester ends. What my tenure review committee suggested to me was maybe do set some kind of hard dates as to when you'll accept late work. So one of the suggestions that we talked about was maybe don't make the late work due by the end of the essay unit. So once you move on from essay 1 to essay 2, you'll no longer take any of the late work from essay 1. So as long as you're still in that essay 1 unit, as long as they get the work in by the time the essay's due, or if you give them a couple of days of a grace period, right? And then that could slow down if you are having that problem of the students just delaying everything. You can set those kinds of deadlines across the semester. That's something I've considered, but so far I haven't had the flood. And it might be also that I keep in contact with them, and I remind them, this is due, let me know if you need help. So they know what they're supposed to be doing, and they get those constant reminders. And then when I'm jumping in and helping them, understand something, clarify something for them, they seem to be pretty good about getting their work in on time. Let's see. Summer, do you see some ones that you think we should make sure we hit before we? Yes, okay, does our campus provide one-on-one tutorial assistance? That's a good one. Yes, we actually just started the online tutorials this semester. I requested, I said I want to make sure I have the same support for my in-class students that I have for my online students. And since we launched our co-recs in fall of 2018, any instructor who wanted an embedded tutor was able to have an embedded tutor. And we did our embedded tutors however it works best with the instructor. So some instructors requested the embedded tutors maybe during drafting on certain days. I had my embedded tutor in my class every day with me, and they sort of mirrored me. So we kind of split up the class. As I was walking around, jumping in student discussions, they would walk around and jump in student discussions. When we hit the workshopping and the drafting stage, we would split the class up, and I would take half of the students and do individual conferences, and she would take the other half and do individual conferences. And as we're calling students up to do their individual conferences, they're sitting back at their desks in their groups doing peer review activities for one another. So what we've done is we're trying to replicate that online. So our Learning Center has set up a Canvas shell, and that's where the students are able to go and access our tutors. So originally, we had it designed so that my embedded tutor was going to be available to my students on Mondays and Fridays, and that it was going to be like this, right? Zoom conferencing. And she has access to my Canvas shell. Let me back up to that. She has access to my Canvas shell. I had our campus add her to our Canvas shell, so she can see everything in my Canvas, right? She can see all of our prompts, all of our assignments. So she knows exactly when everything's due, what exactly we're working on, when we're working on it, any updates that I sent them, she's plugged in and she can see all that. So that's really, really helpful. I don't have to make sure I'm sending prompts to the Writing Center, and we don't have to rely on the students making sure they take the prompt to the Writing Center or locating that information. My tutor already has access to all that, and she already knows what we're working on, and she already knows the specific goals for this essay. So they were trying to do Zoom tutorials. What she right away kind of noticed, and I noticed, is that our students weren't able to do those Zoom tutorials with her because the times that she was available weren't working with them. And so we were talking about adding evening sessions, because again, like I said, my students, they let us know, you know, we're doing these things at night, and we just aren't able to do daytime tutorials. And then the COVID-19 outbreak has happened. So what we've done is the Writing Center is now offering a tutorial option the way I do peer reviews, sort of a drop-off space, right? The students are dropping off their work and their questions, and then the tutors are responding to those students, you know, during their shifts when they can. And we're still doing the Zoom tutorials, the live sessions for the students who want them, but expanding this access by doing it as a drop-off format is going to open that up for a lot of our students. And my students have already responded saying, oh my gosh, this is so helpful. I haven't been able to do a tutorial yet, and I really want to do one. And that was actually supposed to be a requirement in my class. That was required. Students had to do 2 tutorials. And that was another thing. I just dropped it. I told the students, okay, if you can get in and do a tutorial, excellent. I encourage it. Try to do as many as you can. If you can't, don't worry about it. I'm not going to hold it against you. It is what it is. Okay, so that's how we're doing the online tutoring. And this is our first semester, so you know, stay tuned. We'll let you guys know how that's going.
Jamie, I saw a question about how you make your videos that you share with students.
Oh, okay, yes. So yeah, let me tell you, I have like my own little system. So I wasn't really happy with using Zoom to do screen recording. To me, it was kind of really cumbersome and extra stuff I didn't need. So I tried Screencastify. That was garbage. I didn't like it. So what I use is something called Screencastify, and it is a paid program, but for me, the $29 a year is totally worth it. I'm a convenience person. If it's going to make my life way easier and save me time, effort, and frustration, I'm just going to pay the money and do it. So I bought the subscription for, you know, educator discounts. I think it was like $29, like I said. And it is a really, really simple tool. It's a Chrome extension. You click one button and it brings up a really simple interface to be able to screencast. Now, what I do to make sure I'm compliant with right, making sure we have captions, is I got a subscription to this transcription service called Otter. And I have both of these resources on that resource list that I included for you guys. And I've tested out a whole bunch of voice recording and voice transcription apps. You know, and Dragon's crazy expensive, so I wasn't looking to do Dragon. But this Otter one, same thing. They have an educator discount, and it was like $29 a year. And the transcriptions are amazing. So what I do is I just open up that transcription function, I hit record, and then I start filming my videos. And then when I'm done with my video, I go edit those transcripts, and it's really, really accurate. The Otter transcription service is amazing. It's amazing how accurate they are. And then I go into YouTube and I upload the whole transcript file, and YouTube has actually an automatic algorithm. Well, they will automatically time your transcript to your voice. It takes a while depending on how long your video is, But that happens. So I just drop off the copy and paste the entire transcript into that box where you can leave your captions. And like I said, the algorithm does the rest. So it's a really easy way to do the YouTube transcriptions that way, because the other way I was doing is by hand, sitting there typing out the transcriptions, and it just took forever. And so again, this has really, really saved me, like I want to say hours of time is using that transcription app and uploading everything on YouTube. And that way, like I said, I can make sure I have all the captions for everything and they're correct captions. Because the YouTube automatic captions, they're okay, but they're not great. And especially for some of the things that I was doing, like cereal, right? The cereal, it kept spelling it as cereal, like we eat. And then for the main person they're talking about, his name is Adnan Syed. So YouTube captioning was butchering that name all over the place. So I just decided it would be easier and clearer if I used a better service. And you know, that might be something you want to bring up with your tech or your campus, is if they'd be willing to purchase those kinds of tools for us. I'm going to bring it up to my distance coordinator into my campus, because it's been fantastic. And then that's also helpful if you want to leave like voice notes for students, right? And make sure that they have the voice notes and a transcription of what you were saying to them. That works. You can just automatically send them that file. And I've done that before too, and that's really helpful. You think, did that cover it, Summer? You think?
Yeah, I did see one more question. I saw one about office hours. You mentioned you do asynchronous conferences, but you also host office hours.
Right, and so I use You Can Book Me, but then I just learned that just this week from our awesome distance people that you can use a group booking feature in Canvas. I'm going to start setting that up. But what I do is, and I have done some live office hours, but I also leave it as, you know, if they want to email me or chat with me. I also have the remind set up, so if they want to text me, and then we can, you know, do office hours that way. So I keep it kind of offline. That way I'm just not like sitting on a computer screen by myself. I step in and help them, and I make my schedule is clear. I'm available to them during that entire time, and they're good about emailing me during those times. And we get talk back and forth about that. So I had my students contacting me this morning during office hours from 9 to 11, emailing me possible topics for their research paper, and I was emailing back, and we're just kind of sending stuff back and forth. So with whatever they want to do, if they want to jump online and do a Zoom, I told them we can do that. If they want to do text, we can do that. If they want to do email, we can do that. I'm really open to doing that with them however they want to. And for a lot of our students, they're working during when my available time for office hours is. So I'm, that's why I said I try to leave it as the asynchronous. And so far it's been working with them. Okay, what else? Do we have time for one more, you think?
Yeah, let's see. Sorry, my dog's getting a little barky.
Let's see. Okay. Do I use Flipgrid? Yes, I've used Flipgrid for the blogs, but what I found is it's kind of an additional step that you don't really need because Canvas will let the students do videos right there as a discussion, right? It's a tool that when they click reply and it brings up that text box, it has all those different options and they can do a video right there. So if you want to, you can use Flipgrid, and I've tried that, but I've also kind of realized why I have them exit or go to another part of Canvas. You can embed Flipgrid into Canvas. That's how I've done it too. And in fact, for my blog number 1, I gave them an additional late assignment, since I don't do points. Instead of doing extra credit, it was an additional late assignment if they left a video, if they did either a video blog, a blog, or if they went and did a Flipgrid blog. So you can use it, but Canvas has some pretty good tools embedded in there.
Hey, Jamie.
Mm-hmm.
I saw a couple of questions earlier that I think with the last bit of time might be good to return to. Is
Sure.
Just saying maybe more big picture about how you support students' affective needs. I could see it sort of woven into a lot of what you were showing us, but maybe just talk more explicitly about it.
Okay, yeah, so let me pull up. Okay, so for the students' affective needs, so that's why a lot of the assignments that I have are designed as that kind of low stakes collaborative practice. And I make sure my students understand that when we're doing those assignments, just the assignments that are building up to the essay, I'm not nitpicking things like grammar, and I'm not nitpicking things like word choice, right? Especially because I'm trying to get them to understand, don't edit yourself when you're in the process of generating ideas and trying to write. Get everything down, right? That's kind of the download as a way to think about it. Get everything down. These are the download drafts, and then we'll worry about fixing them up. And so that's something there is I let them know, you know, I'm not judging all of your writing, and especially for assignments like journals and blogs, I've told them spelling, grammar, punctuation, that doesn't matter there at all. I'm not even going, that's not even a consideration, because I want that to be a discussion space where the students feel like they're able to discuss and they're not being judged for mistakes and typos. So I would say make sure you kind of create that ethos of we're here to learn, I'm here to give you feedback. And I do make sure they understand, you know, when we hit the essay stage, yes, those things matter. I am looking at your spelling and your punctuation and your grammar, but I also weigh that against everything else, right? And that is no longer one of my concerns. And that's something that's really important to students. If you conference with your students, this is the one thing that I've noticed every single semester I've ever taught. When we start those conferences, the first thing the students say when they walk up to me is, I'm so sorry, this is so bad. Oh my gosh, I can't write. They start apologizing immediately. And it's like they've been traumatized. And so I start by reducing that. I'm like, no, let's see, you know, let's start picking apart these ideas. And one of the good things that you can do is just give them a whole bunch of positive feedback on those early assignments, and let them know what's working. And that for me has also been a huge adjustment, is I've had to start telling myself, stop looking at what the students can't do. Stop looking at what they can't do and start looking at what they can do. Because if you start with that, it's amazing, right? If you're like, oh my gosh, look at what these students can do, and they try so hard for you, it really reframes everything for them and for us. So, you know, I would say make sure the students feel safe and that they understand when you're grading for certain things and when they're not being graded for certain things. I would say also, like I said, adjust our expectations. We need to remember that we're their first class, right? We're not the capstone class. We're not the final English class they're going to be taking, and that we're supposed to be creating writers across the curriculum. We're creating better readers, writers, and critical thinkers to be able to handle their full college schedule and being adults in the world. So that for me is one of those considerations, is that it's not just about my subject matter. It's about making sure that they're better students, better people, better thinkers, right? And so I make sure they understand that this class is not just about evaluation and judgment. It's about learning and sharing and enlightening ourselves and bettering ourselves and trying, right? And that's why we start off that very first essay unit with those things like growth mindset and grit, and having them completely rethink the way they learn or look at their own learning, the way they think about their own effort and motivation, the way they are processing all of this stuff, right? It's kind of a mind shift. We have to get them to shift their mind. And that starts right away from the very first assignments. And that's something that has just been absolutely, again, transformational, is starting off with an essay unit that focuses on kind of those types of skills and those types of mindset.
All right. Well,
does that
I think
kind
we're
of help
just
address that?
Yeah, I think we're just about out of time. So I just wanted to say thank you to everybody. Thank you particularly to Jamie for being here. And thank you to all of you for coming to our first webinar. I hope everyone enjoyed it and learned a lot like I did from Jamie. Just a few quick things. We have been recording, so unless there is some sort of technological issue, we should be able to have this recorded and posted on the CAP publications page. We will also add Jamie's PowerPoint and then links to the handouts as well. We are having another webinar next week on Wednesday. We are focusing on ESL in that one. So that's Wednesday from 3 to 4. I sent out a link today and it's posted on our CAP Facebook page. So if you're interested in hearing more about how ESL is moving through this. That will be next week. And I'm going to send out a survey after this just to get your feedback on that, on the webinar. So, and we would like to hear from you just on what we can do to support you, what other topics you might find helpful. So thank you all so much for being here. Thank you for all you're doing for your students in this very difficult time. We appreciate you, and I hope you are all well. Thanks. Bye.